Welcome to another badass video from Network Engineering Academy. Now, this video, it's all about the 25 things to know about the switch, about switches. Now, probably you're thinking, Jorge, I know that you just uploaded a video the other day about the same topic. So what's going on? Well, let me tell you. You see, I went through that video and I'm like, and by the way, that's because I edit my own videos. And I'm like, you know, that's a good video, but I know that I can do better. I know that I can make that video a badass video. And that's the reason why I decided to film that video all over again. So that I can give you more content, so that I can give you more value, more information that's gonna help you for you to get this topic about switches really well. And for you to see like the big picture, and not only for you to know this technically in your mind, but also for you to be able to communicate it to other people, because that's exactly what's going to make a difference in your IT career. Now, the other thing that I will do is I will break down that content that I have into videos. Obviously, this video number 1. And I want to do this because I want to make sure that I take that time to go over the 25 things in detail. Again, I really care about you and you becoming a high-paid, a badass network or system engineer in the IT field. Now, if this topic about switches is new to you, I'm gonna ask you for you to go through this video not once but twice, and obviously for you to take notes. Now, if you think you know a lot about switches, because that's probably something that you've been doing for a few months, maybe a few years, you've been in the IT, then I'm gonna ask you this question, and please engage with me right now, okay? So let's say that I come up to you and I ask you, can you tell me 25 things about switches? Will you be able to do that? And by the way, how will you answer that question? First, will you be able to come up with 25 things about switches? And second, how will you answer that question? You see, because probably you know a lot about switches, but maybe it's difficult for you to communicate that to other people, for you to be able to teach that to other people. And let me tell you something. At one point in your IT career, you will have to work and talk to project managers, maybe executives. And obviously, at one point, you're gonna go through the job interview process. And you better know how to communicate, how to sell, and how to market what you know, the experience that you have to other people. Because that's exactly what's gonna make you different from the other 10 or 20 candidates. And that's more likely why you will get the job. So again, even though you know a lot about switches, go through this video and I know that you will be able to learn a lot and how to put what you know so far in a way that you can communicate this topic. And that's because the way that I'm gonna teach it, the way that I'm gonna approach it, that's based on that. Because the way that you learn a technical topic, the way that you process that information makes a huge difference. So again, this video number 1 out of 2 videos, out of this topic, the 25 things to know about the switch, about the switches. So let's get right into it. So number 1, switches work as soon as you take them out of the box. Now we can probably move to the second one, right? But no, let's take a minute and talk about this. How can you communicate this to someone else in a way that they can see it, in a way that they can visualize that, and obviously for them to get it? You know, because it looks simple, right? I mean, you take the switch out of the box and it works. Now, how can you communicate that to someone else? And probably this is something that you know, but again, when you are able to connect information related to a topic oh my God, it makes a difference for you to be able to recall this information in a way for that's gonna allow you to apply that in real life. So again, right? So a switch works as soon as you take it out of the box. Now, this is something and how I will come up to someone and say, you know, you have those 5 computers, right? Now, in order for those 5 computers to communicate with each other, they obviously need an IP address. But by the way, we need to think about how to connect them with each other. And the way for you to be able to do that is by you getting a switch. Now, a switch is something that you get, you plug it in, and you don't have to do really anything to it. You just plug it in and it will work. And what that means, those 5 computers that you have will be able to communicate with each other. And they will be able to share that internet connection that you have. You see? How can you put something so simple in a way for someone else to like see it? That's exactly what makes a difference. Now let's move on to number 2. Switches connects and allows end devices to communicate with each other. End devices. That's computers, that can be servers, that can be other network devices, printers, right? So again, this is so simple, but how can you communicate this to someone else? Well, let's say that you come up to me and you basically ask, Jorge, can you just tell me 2 things about switches? Well, right away, like you get the switch, a brand new switch out of the box, and guess what? It works. You plug in a few end devices and they will be able to communicate with each other. Obviously, as long as those end devices, computers have an IP address. And that's exactly what a switch does. You know, that's the second thing. It's gonna allow these computers to be able to communicate in the network. And by the way, that one internet access that you have at home is gonna basically, you will be able to allow to share that connection to that 5 or 7 computers that you have at home. Again, this is so simple that probably I know that you know this, but how can you communicate that to someone else? That's exactly what makes a difference. Now let's move on. Number 3, switches read physical addresses, MAC addresses. Now what else can you tell me about this? Because this, again, basic. But what else can you say that you will look at an expert? You know, I'm gonna see you as an expert, but only if you tell me more about this, right? Because if you just tell me this, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But once you are teaching me something related to that topic, that's when I'm like, wow, automatically my mind goes on, you are an expert. You are a badass. So one way for you to come up here and be like, okay, you know, well, switches read physical addresses, MAC addresses. And by the way, a MAC address, it's a 48-bit hexadecimal number, and it's called a physical address because let me tell you, like that computer that you see over there, well, that computer has a MAC address. And that MAC address, it's a physical address. What that means, you can take that computer, you know, back home or to the next office. And that MAC address, the 48-bit hexadecimal number, will never change. That's why it's called a physical address. You see how from something very basic, I was able to come up with a story. I was able to put something out there for the other person to see it, to visualize. That's exactly what you need to do. That's exactly what you need to do. You know, how to, when you approach the process of learning, when you approach it this way, the way that I'm teaching you right now, again, makes a huge fucking difference. So let's move on. Number 4. Switches can be managed or unmanaged. Managed or unmanaged. Probably, again, this is something that you know already. But probably this is something that you didn't come up. You know, when I ask you, you know, can you name 25 things about switches? This is why when you connect information related to that topic makes a huge difference because you are able to have a better conversation, you know? So what would you say to make it this so simple in a way for someone else to see it? So again, switches can be managed or unmanaged. And one thing that you can say is like, you know, there are unmanaged switches, yes, but more likely the ones that you're gonna find out there are managed switches. And obviously one of the big brands out there, they're the Cisco switches, just like this one. This is a Cisco switch, and yes, you can manage this switch. And by the way, right, you take the switch out of the box, you plug it in, and boom, it works. But you can do a lot more, but only if you connect and remote in for you to obviously configure the switch. Now, an unmanaged switch, that's something probably that you can get on Best Buy. You know, it's gonna probably cost you like $40, $60, $80 maybe. You know, you bring it home, you plug it in, because probably you have like 6, 7 computers. You know, you have like many kids like me, right? So you need like a small switch. And I'm like, okay, so I mean, I don't need that to be that technical. I just need something that I can share that connection. Well, I'm just gonna go to Best Buy, get this $60 unmanaged switch. I plug in the computers and boom, they work, they can communicate, and they can access the internet. You see, like, how can you put it in a way for someone to be like, oh, like, I mean, I got it before, but now I see it. And that's exactly when you're able to do that, when they're able to connect with you. And yes, you want them to connect with you, okay? So let's move on to number 5. Now, okay, let's talk about when you manage a switch. Well, when you manage a switch, right, the first thing that you need to do is to connect to it. And that's through that console port. So that's another thing for you to say, you know, about switches. Well, you know, we have unmanaged and managed switches, but let's talk about the managed switches. You know, and let's say that you have a Cisco switch. Well, you have to connect in, right, locally, and that's through that console port. Now, the console port is this one. This is the console port, and that's for you to connect in, for you to remote in. Now, the type of cable that you use is this one, okay? This is the type of cable that you use. Now, this is the console cable. This cable goes connected, or this connection goes connected to your computer. But obviously, more likely on your laptop, you don't have this serial connection. So now you have to go on Amazon, eBay, and then get this adapter, right? So you're gonna put it here. Now you have this adapter. You're gonna plug this one to your computer, and then the other end, this one, you're gonna plug it in right here. So you can start logging into the switch and for you to be able to manage that switch. Now here, I have a 3750, okay? So this is a 3750 switch. This is like really a good model. Now you don't see that port like in the picture here, but if I go in the back, right there, somewhere, that's the port. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna grab this, and I'm gonna plug it in right here. Bam! And now I can go and plug in the other end to my laptop. And voila, I will be able to remote in. Okay? So again, this is something for you to like, oh, okay, makes sense. I'm telling you, one thing is for someone to be like, I get it, but when they are like, I see it, like I see it happening, you know, that's when you are a badass communicator. And you better be a badass communicator, you know, based on what you know, based on what you are learning, the experience that you have, because that's exactly how can you like, you know, go from where you are right now and accelerate your IT career, you know, and be ahead of the game than most people in the IT community. They have no idea how to communicate what they know, how to sell what they know, how to market what they know. Okay? So again, from this point on, we have two options, because obviously you don't want to connect to that switch all the time locally, right? That's in the server room, you know? So you want to obviously go back to your office and be like, okay, I want to connect back to the switch, but I don't want to go all the way to the server room. So you first locally connect to it, and you have two options, and that's Telnet and SSH. Telnet, port, what number? Come on, tell me what number? 23, right? Now, SSH, that's port 22, right? Again, what else can you tell me more about this? Something that probably you see, oh, this is so basic, Jorge. Okay, what else can you tell me in order for me not to see it basic? You know, the more you talk about it, obviously related to this topic, the more that I will see you as an expert, as a badass. So, again, right, well, Jorge, you have Telnet, and this is port 23, and by the way, that uses TCP port. You know, SSH, the same, you know, TCP port, but port number 22. And by the way, that one, secure shell, secure. What that means, that information that's going from, just, let's say, your laptop to that switch, it's encrypted. Now, Telnet, it's not encrypted. Someone can tap in and get that information, and they will be able to see exactly what's going on. You know, what commands, you know, are you sending, and what information that switching is giving you back based on that commands that you're putting in. Oh, okay, you see like how something that basic, I was able to take it to the next level in a way for not only for you to see it, but also for you to be like, oh, like Jorge, like, you know. And that's exactly what the way that you need to approach when you are talking to someone else. You know, for them to be able to see you, not like, well, that was basic. Okay, I get it. Instead of like, man, this guy or like this girl, wow, a badass. You know, I got it and I was able to see it happening. That's exactly what you need to do. Okay? And it takes time. Sometimes, depending on where you are right now, it's all about practice. It takes time. But once you are able to do that, boom, huge difference that will make in your IT career. So let's move on, right? So switches work at the layer 2 of the OSI model. And probably this is something that right away, you know, come up in your mind, you know, went through your mind. Jorge, come on, like, switches work on the layer 2 of the OSI model, and that's the data link layer. So we have 7 layers. You see, that's at this point when you have to tell me more related to this basic, you know, answer. Oh, it works on the layer 2 of the OSI model. What else can you tell me? Obviously, I'm expecting for you to tell me that. Like, can you tell me a few things about switches? Well, one thing I can tell you is, you know, they work on the layer 2 of the OSI model. Okay, that's it. Blah, 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 but that's it based on that? Like, I'm expecting for you to say that. But what else can you say that I'm going to be like, whoa, right? One thing can be like, oh, Jorge, you know, switches work on the layer 2 of the OSI model. And by the way, the OSI model, it's based on 7 layers. The top 3 layers, data. The bottom layers, you know, layer 4, 3, 2, and 1, that's transport, network, data link, and physical, you know. That's basically where, you know, everything is happening, you know, for us, the network engineers. Because let me tell you one thing, like routers, they work on the layer 3 of the OSI model, and they only care about IP addresses. But now, when we're talking about like switches, the data link layer of the OSI model. But let me tell you one thing, Jorge, you know, like we have a we have a layer 3 switch, and it's a, come on, layer 3. It's a router and a switch in one box, right? So that means it's gonna work on the layer 3 of the OSI model, and that's the reason why they call that switch a layer 3 switch. You see? How I was able to come up with so much information just based on this basic answer? And probably right now you're like, wow, I knew that. Okay. But can you communicate it to someone else for someone else to see it, and obviously for them to see you as an expert? That's exactly what makes a difference, okay? So again, switches work at the layer 2 of the OSI model, the data link layer. Now let's move on. 6, have a different models. And let's focus on Cisco, obviously. Let's focus on Cisco because that's the biggest brand out there. You know, so if you come up to me, and let's say that I'm the manager and I'm asking, a few questions because, by the way, you're going through the job interview process and you're like, oh, man, I know how to, work with switches, with routers, with firewalls, I know how to do this and I know how to do that. And by the way, I know how to do that too. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's really good. But can you tell me some of the models of switches that have you worked on? Will you be able to answer that question? Because if you're not able to answer that question, what that means to me is that you are just based on book knowledge, maybe some video knowledge, but not really hands-on. And you may see how probably things work in that technical level, but not in real life. You cannot put yourself outside the box for you to think, okay, so what's going on? Because this is another issue, big problem that many people in the IT community have. And that's that when they have an issue, a networking issue, they always approach it on technical level. They never, not all of them, but most people in the IT community, they don't think about like, okay, let me step back. Let me see what's going on. Let me see like the big picture about the problem. Now based on that, I'm like, okay, now let me do this first. Or probably the first thing that I need to do is to ask a few questions before I go all technical mode. That's a big issue. And this is not because, oh, I know everything. No, because I ask the right questions when I talk to managers, when I talk to team leads. And they basically, Jorge, like when you get those really technical, like analytic, it's really hard for them to step back and see the big picture. They're too focused on the technical level. And that's good, but I mean, not that good. Again, I'm really giving you gold throughout these videos. And I know if you listened and if you apply this in your IT career and some other things in your personal life, your life and your IT career will never be the same. Because the same thing, you are approaching this completely different. So, have different models, right? Cisco switches. Like this one right here, this one is a 2960 model. 2960 model. What else? Before I pull out some of the models, we have the 3550 models, we have the 3750 models, we have the 4500 and the 6500 models. That's some of the models out there for Cisco. Obviously, the higher you go, the better they are, the more money you pay, the better support you get as well. Now, based on this, let's say that you are able to come up with this, I'm like, that's great, that's great. Me thinking, well, that tells me that you really have worked on some of the switches. Okay, so now let me ask you this question. Can you tell me, one of the big difference between, a 2960 and a 3750? One big difference. Can you tell me? What would you answer me? So right away, probably, Jorge, come on, this is so easy. A 2960, like this one, it's a layer 2 switching. Now, this one, the 3560, it's a layer 3 switch. What that means, Jorge, is that it's a router and a switch. And I will be like, that's great. But what else can you tell me? What else can you tell me? Again, I'm expecting that. So I'm not going to think of you like high level, because more likely the other 5-10 candidates will more likely answer the same question that way. So again, what else can you tell me? Because I'm expecting that answer. Because you are CCNA certified. By the way, that's a Cisco certification. That's CCNA routing and switching. So, because you're CCNA, I'm expecting for you to know that. But what else can you tell me? Now, the other thing that you can probably come up with was like, Jorge, obviously a layer 2 switch, a layer 3 switch, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, that 3560, It's a switch. When you take them out of the box, it's just a switch. But if you want that switch to be a router as well, you need to type the command IP routing. You know, that's an issue that I had, you know, when I was doing some labs. You know, I'm like, this is not working. It's not giving me some of the commands that I wanted to see. And then I did some research and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to type the IP routing, because that's exactly what makes this layer 3 switch a router as well. And now at that point, I'm like, whoa. Now you differentiate yourself from the other 10 candidates. And guess what? I'm gonna remember you and not them. Now imagine if you answer all of the questions that way. And by the way, it's a science behind on how to answer. Yes, I said it. It's a science behind on how to answer technical questions. And I teach a lot. And I will be teaching a lot more in the membership side. So you better join the membership side so that I can walk you through a lot more technical topics and non-technical topics. You know, something that's going to help you on how to accelerate the process of learning, for you to have the right mindset, the right beliefs, for you to approach your IT career the right way so you can accelerate the process to make things happen. And many more things, the way that you market yourself, the way that you're going to position yourself, the way that you're going to go through a job interview process, the way that you're going to reach out to people, the questions that you need to ask, and a lot more. Anyways, going back here, okay? So again, right, so that's one of the things to differentiate for you to know. Now, let me give you more content and more info. So you come up with that answer and I'm like, wow, like, I like you so far, I like you. But now let me ask you another question, you know. What will be the difference between two layer 3 switches based on one, the model being at 3560 and the other one at 3750? What will be one of the main differences? Remember, both layer 3 switches. What will be the difference? And the answer is, come on, you know this, stacking, right? The 3750s are for stacking. And that can probably be your answer. Again, what else can you say? Well, you know, stacking, that's going to allow you for you to manage 3 switches, 5 switches, up to 9 switches as one. Yeah, physically you will see like 5 switches, but you will manage them as one. Now, that router that I have here, this router, switch, my bad, switch, okay? So this one is a 3750 model. And if I go back here, okay, like right there, it has for you to stack, you know, one switch on top of the other. And that's something that you better know really well. Let me tell you why. Because any company that I have worked for, they all have it. All of them. They all have stacking switches. And obviously that's something that you better know how to do. That you better know how to configure. That you better know how to troubleshoot. Bam. Okay, so another thing for you to know. So let's keep moving. So number 7. Switches have an operating system. Okay, so we have unmanaged and managed switches. Unmanaged, you take them out of the box, you plug it in, they work. You cannot really do anything with those. They just work. But managed switches like the Cisco, obviously they have to have something in it in order for us to manage that switch. Well, that's basically an operating system, and that's the iOS. Now, what's the version or versions that you have worked with? Now, if you're not able to answer me that question, then that means that you have no idea, a lot about real life. Probably you're like book smart, video smart, but real life, you never went through that process. And that's because I go back to the same. You focus too much on the technical. You never step back. And that's something that I tell my students. You need to step back and be like, okay, how can I process this information in a way that's going to make sense to me, in a way that I can probably communicate this to someone else, in a way that I'm like, okay, how can I connect it with other related topics so that I can remember, so that I can communicate it in a way for someone else to see it? What I just give you, it's gold. I'm telling you. What I just give you, the way that you go through that information and learning, it's gold. Now, versions. Let's go back to the versions. If you're not able to come up with, oh, version 10.1, like Cisco, like no, right? I mean, we have 12.1, 3.5, that's many versions, 12 point and on. Now, the new one they came up with was 15.1 and on, different versions. But again, that at least gives me an idea. Now, if I ask you, oh, that's really good answer, but how, if you have a switch right now in front of you, how will you know what type of iOS version that switch has? Will you be able to say that command? And that will be show version, right? Like that's one way. What's a few ways, right? But again, once you tell me one, that's more than enough. But you see, it's not for me to ask you, that's for you to tell me. Oh, and by the way, one way for you to see like the version of that switch, because I have worked with 12.1 or 12.3, or the other day I was working with 15.1, I was doing some lab, and blah, you see, like you are teaching me, So, and that's exactly, again, the way that you need to approach it. So let's keep moving. So 8. So switches have a CAM table, and that's content addressable memory. Content addressable memory. So what that means is that when you connect switches, and by the way, I have another video that it's focused on switches, like what are switches? This is 25 things about switches, but on the other video that I have on YouTube, it's about how switches work, okay? And I go more in detail on the process and the function of a switch. Now, here I have a switch. Right, obviously. So when you connect a computer, so let's say, let me go through this process really quick. So this is a new switch, I plug it in. New switch out of the box, I plug it in. So I have a computer and I will plug it in. Now that computer is off. The switch is on. So I go to that switch and I type, show MAC address table. Show MAC address table. And that's gonna be nothing. I'm not gonna see anything connected, even though I have a computer connected to it. But why? Because that computer is off. Now, once I turn on that computer is gonna send a broadcast. Okay, it's gonna send a broadcast. And more likely that broadcast will be for that DHCP server, asking for an IP address, like, hey, I wanna connect to the network, but by the way, I don't have an IP address, I don't have a subnet mask, I don't have none of that TCP/IP settings. Help me out. So it's basically saying that broadcast, right? So that switch is gonna get that broadcast and it's gonna send it to every single device that is connected to that switch. Obviously, at this point, that's no other device connected to that switch. I'm just giving you an idea. But right now, that switch will know, hey, on port 2, I have the following device with the following MAC address. And that's because, remember, at that point, that computer connected to the switch. And now I can go back and be like, okay, show MAC address table. And boom, I will see port 2 with the MAC address of that device, let's say that computer. And that's exactly what's called the CAM table. A lot of people call it the CAM table because they want to look so nerd, like geek, like, yeah, I know all the details and everything. But most normal people like us, it's just the MAC address table, okay? So, and obviously this is something that switches have. Now, number 9. So, switches make a smart forwarding decisions. Okay, well, that's something good for you to tell me, like switches make a smart forwarding decisions. Based on what? Based on what? What else can you tell me? Again, every time you're gonna answer something, always remember, what else? What else can I say? Obviously related to this topic. So if you're saying, like, well, Jorge, and you were asking me about switches, well, one thing that I can tell you is they make smart forwarding decisions. Okay, like I get it, but I cannot see it. Can you tell me something so that I can see what you're talking about? Oh, yeah. So it makes, forwarding decisions based on physical addresses, MAC addresses. Again, this is something that I previously told you, Jorge, physical address that's a 48-bit hexadecimal number that don't change on the end device. And by the way, It makes smart forwarding decisions because another thing that I was, talking to you previously, it has that MAC address table. And it will know like, okay, if you want to communicate with that computer, let me see if I have that computer based on the MAC address and my MAC address table. And if I do, no problem. You send me the message and I make sure that I'm going to send the message to that computer. And that computer, it's on port, let's say port 20. But now, if I don't have it in my MAC address table, more likely I'm going to send a broadcast. And that's just basically me saying, hey, I'm looking for Johnny. Who's Johnny? Oh, that's you. Great. Where are you, Johnny? Oh, port 21. Great. Now, next time someone wants to communicate with you, I know where you are, and I'm going to send it to port 20. And that's how they make smart forwarding decisions. You see? I see it now. 10. Forward broadcast messages. Whoa. Forward broadcast messages. So that's something that I previously told you, right? Like if that switch and the MAC address table, CAM table, don't have the MAC address of the other computer that computer wants to communicate with, it's gonna send a broadcast. Now, when it says forward broadcast messages, what that means is this, right? So we have this switch. And let's say that on top of this switch, we have another switch. And on top of that switch, you have another switch. And by the way, they're not stacking, they're standalone. We don't manage that switch as one, standalone switches. So one switch is connected to the other switch and is connected to the other switch. Probably because each of those switches is on different floor. So we have 3 floors. So let's say all the way to floor number 1. You have this computer that wants to communicate with, a computer that's all the way on level 3, on floor 3. So because probably at that point that computer is new, this switch may not have that MAC address. So when it doesn't have it, again, it's gonna send that, it's gonna broadcast it and be like, hey, where is Johnny? And that message is gonna go to the next switch. Again, the other switch, the same, it's gonna forward that broadcast. Hey, it's any Johnny in floor number 2? No, but it's gonna go again to that connection based on the switch 3. And on switch 3 will be like, oh, I got a broadcast. Hey, anybody Johnny here? Yes, that's me, I'm the new guy. Oh, where you connected to? I'm port 17. Great. And then it's gonna send it back and be like, hey, I found Johnny, and that's all the way over there. So at that point, what's gonna happen? Switch 1 will have not the port 17. We'll have the port where that switch is connected to the other switch. So let's say that we use port 24 to connect switch 1 to switch 2. And switch 2, we use port 23 to connect it to port 23 and switch 3, the top floor. So I only care about switch 1, right? Where is that connected to on switch 2? On port 24. So that's exactly, and obviously on that port, I'm gonna have not one, but a lot of MAC addresses because that's a lot of MAC addresses coming from that connection. So that's one of the things for you to think about broadcast messages. It forwards broadcast messages, because let me tell you, Jorge, routers do not forward broadcast messages. If a router gets a broadcast message because you have that router connected to that switch, the router will be like, not me, this message ends here. I'm not gonna send it to the other 3, 4, 5, 6 connections that I have for the other 3, 4, 5, 6 networks that I have connected with me. Right, you're telling me more, not just something basic. Now, 11, frames. And I'm about to finish this video. You see, I wanted to take the time to make this video probably 20-25 minutes long. And on the next video number 2, I'm gonna go all the way through the next ones, okay? Until we get to number 25. So 2 more on this video, this one. Frames, 11. So that's another thing probably that you thought of about frames. Jorge, switches, data link layer, MAC addresses, frames. Okay, good. I'm expecting for you to say that. What else can you tell me? Okay, you come up with frames, but what else can you tell me about frames? Oh, by the way, Jorge, we have these things called PDUs, packet data units. And let's say, let's see it this way, Jorge, you know? Like we have the OSI model, that's 7 layers, you know, and that's how one computer, let's say, computer A wants to communicate with computer B. So it's gonna has to go through the 7 layers of the OSI model. And by the way, it starts with number 7, the application layer. So it's gonna go through this process. And every time it goes through a layer, it's gonna go through a PDU, a packet data unit. But by the way, the top 3 layers, Jorge, it's just data, you know, the ones and zeros, all data. But once it gets to the transport layer, now that data gets put in a segment. And then it goes to the network layer, and now it's a packet. And now once it goes to the network layer, it's gonna go to the data link layer. And at the data link layer, it's called the PDU, a frame. And by the way, Jorge, on that frame, you will have a few things. One of them is the source, MAC address, I believe the MAC of that computer, and the destination where it's gonna go to. And by the way, Jorge, and that frame too, it has the CRC. And that's gonna check basically that frame gets exactly how left computer A to computer B. You see, one thing is for you to say frames, and the other for someone else, the other candidate, to come in and be like, yeah, frames and this and that too. And you probably left that conversation with someone else. You left the interview thinking, man, I'm gonna get the job. They asked me like, I don't know, 7, 10 questions, technical questions, and I know that I answer all of them right. Yeah, but guess what? Probably the other 10 candidates did too, but that was only one that was able to talk more about that answer, that topic based on that question. And that's more likely who got the job. And that was more likely me. That's how I go on getting my job every time that I go after a better position. Again, something for you to think about. Now let's go to the last one, okay, in this video, 12. Port speed, broadcast messages. Okay, port speed and broadcast messages. Now this is something that I did completely wrong. Yes, I don't know why I put broadcast messages. That probably was from the different slide. But again, 12, port speed, we have 10 megabits per second, we have 1,000, that equals to 1 gigabit per second, and then we have 10 gigabits per second. Now, more likely like this one, right? We have 12, we have 24 ports. And these 24 ports, based on that model, they are 100 megabits per second, okay? 100 megabits per second. Now we have here a Cat, this is by the way, a Cat6 cable. And that Cat6 cable, depending, it can go up to 100 megabits per second, or depending again on the category of the cable, can go up to 1,000 megabits per second. And this is something more likely that you will plug in any of these 24 ports. Going back here, remember, we have this, and this one is for the console. Now, here we have 4, okay? These 4 ports, that's for us to add what we call a small form factor pluggable. Oh my God, I remember. A small form, I forgot, you see? A small form pluggable, let's say SFP. And that's basically adding, you know, a type of a connection called STP. SF, my God, SFP. And that's because you want to use fiber connection, and we have different type of fiber optic connections. You know, we have this one, we have this one. So depending on which one you want to use, that's the type of SFP pluggable that you're gonna put in right here, okay? And these 4. So let me take a look here, okay? So we have 48 ports. They are 100 megabits per second. But then we have 4, okay, here. And that's where we're gonna add the a small form factor pluggable connection. There we go. And again, depending on what type of fiber optic connection that we want to use and plug in. And that's because a fiber optic connection is going to allow us, obviously, to plug in up to that connection to be a 1 gigabit per second and up to 10 gigabits per second. And that's more likely when you connect it to other switches. Bam! Probably this video took about 25 minutes up to 30 minutes, but that's fine, you know. I took the time to really go through everything that I wanted to go through, and I really hope that now that you're going through this content, this video, the way that I walk you through will make a lot more sense to you. Not only for you to get it, but for you to be able to see it, for you to be able to process this information in a way that's gonna really help you to take your IT career to the next level. It starts step by step, right? So that's it. Again, make sure you comment this video. Take the time, you know, subscribe, share the video, and I will talk to you on video number 2, part number 2, and I will take you from number 13 all the way to 25. So I will talk to you, bam, there.